everybody doing this afternoon? Oh my God, that's pathetic. Let's have it again. How are you guys all doing today? That's better. We're gonna have to practice, I think. Okay, so I have a few announcements before we get started with our panel discussion today. I want to welcome you all to the 19th Annual Shepard Symposium on Social Justice. We're super excited about our program this year. We've got lots going on. We had an amazing presentation by Peggy McIntosh last night. She had an audience of probably 250 people and a lot of really great feedback. We had over 55 people online watching her presentation, which is a record high for us at the Shepard Symposium. So give it up for our tech people. We also are really proud of our register list this year. We have over 700 people registered. We've never had that number ever. So give it up for our people that are blasting everything. Our media is really working. We had over 50 proposals this year. We've got several concurrent sessions happening this morning, which was really great. And then we'll have more concurrent sessions this afternoon, tomorrow morning, Friday afternoon, and then also Saturday morning, a select few concurrent sessions. We're focusing in on our Gay Straight Alliance students who are here. Raise your hand if you're a Gay Straight Alliance from somewhere in Wyoming or Colorado. Give it up for the GSAs. Excellent. We're really happy to have you guys here, and we're so looking forward to Saturday morning and your dance party on Saturday evening. So I've got a couple of announcements. We have our fundraiser party, our 5th annual fundraiser party, Black and White Affair, starting at 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. at the Laramie Civic Center North Gym. It's a donation cover. We'll have a DJ. We'll have lots of prizes, doing a raffle to raise money for none other than our GSAs for Colorado and Wyoming. The money will go to them. They'll apply for the money, and then if they want to do their own programs at their high school or in their community, we'll be glad to fund that. So let's give it up for them. Another announcement, on May 10th at 2 p.m. here at the University of Wyoming in the BCPA Concert Hall, we are hosting, co-sponsoring Give 'em Hope, the story of Harvey Milk. We've got flyers and a poster at the registration table if you're interested. Tickets are $15 a piece, and it looks like it's going to be a great show. It's the Denver Gay Men's Choir. Chorus is going to be here, and it's going to be a fun time. I know it's Mother's Day, but maybe Mom wants to go with you. This summer, the Summer Institute on Human Rights is happening. It's co-sponsored by the Wyoming Humanities Council, the Global and Area Studies Department, the Wyoming Center for Global Studies, and the Ruth R. L. Bogan Foundation, June 14th through the 19th. We've got flyers at the registration table also for you if you're interested in going this summer. We also have out in the lobby a couple different vendors. One vendor is our jewelry lady. She comes every year. She sells jewelry that benefits women who make the jewelry in third world countries, I believe. I need to probably get it. She's been here, and her jewelry is fantastic. I bought this wonderful purse last year that was made out of vinyl records. It was pretty cool. It was totally retro. And then also we have the Wyoming Democratic Party is out there selling t-shirts. They have summer institutes if you're interested in communications, digital, media, finance, and their applications are due April 24th. So you'll find these applications at their website or at their table out there. And then tomorrow for our spotlight, we have Io Tillett. She does the Self-Evident Truth Project, and we have flyers, and we also have release forms. If you're interested in having your portrait taken by Io Tillett, and a part of this project, which will be displayed in the Washington Mall this summer, then the release form that you'll need to fill out is at the registration table. And if you're under 18, you will need a parent or guardian to sign for you. So if you want to do that and your parent's not here with you today, take it home with you, have them sign it, and then bring it back tomorrow or Saturday. And she'll be here. She'll also be doing her TED Talk for our noontime spotlight tomorrow at 12:30. This afternoon, we have the great pleasure of a panel on marriage equality and what is happening now. And I wanted to say a couple of things about this particular panel. We've done this panel for, I think, 3 years in a row. This is our 3rd year. And the reason that we've been doing it consistently every year is because things change by the day, by the week. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping abreast of what's happening, what we can be doing as activists, and what needs to be done, and what's happening in our LGBTQ community that's affecting them directly with the lack of legal system or protection, and also with the things that have passed. So my wonderful friend and State Representative Dr. Kathy Connolly has graciously agreed to put this panel together for us again this year. She's in the dog pit with some of the most vicious of our state representatives, and she's fighting hard for us. So I really want to give her a round of applause for all the hard work that she does. She's going to be giving a brief introduction to each of the panelists: Melanie Vigil, Noah.
You can do it.
Novogradsky, and then Jaron Artery. And so she'll give a little bit. I know Noah, that's why I was giving him a hard time. He's a fun guy, but I like his wife a lot better. Just kidding. His kids are pretty cool too. But I want to give them a round of applause and thank them for coming today, and we're going to learn a lot today. So keep your ears open and be ready to change some opinions.
All right. If I speak and we each speak from sitting on the panel, can you hear us in the back? Yes? Good. Okay. So let me just give a brief overview of the panelists, and then we'll get going, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time before our kind of 1:45 close in order to take your questions. So we've got a dynamite panel with us today. Our first speaker will be Professor Noah Novogradsky from the law school. Noah not only is a professor of law, but he's the co-director of the International Human Rights Consortium within the law school. Noah's CV is just a panacea of human rights work, from Eritrea to Addis Ababa to working in trafficking. But the reason that he's here today is that he has, with some of the other top international human rights attorneys in the country, submitted not only one but several amicus curiae briefs to the Supreme Court regarding marriage equality issues, focusing on how marriage equality in the United States is similar to, different to, et cetera, from what's going around the globe. And his amicus curiae brief was featured just this week in the New York Times. And so we have, yes, somebody goes, whoa! All right, so we've asked Noah to talk about kind of the state of marriage equality in the United States, in particular, as it's moving to a Supreme Court hearing this month, as well as in the global context. Okay, the next speaker will bring us home. This will be Jaron Artery, who is the executive director of Wyoming Equality, which is Wyoming's statewide gay rights group. Jaron has been a tireless advocate for gay rights generally and marriage equality specifically, and helped form the groups, the plaintiffs that put together the statewide case for marriage equality. Now, ultimately, Wyoming came to get marriage equality in October of last year because of the 10th Circuit decision of the federal courts, but we had statewide movements as well, and Jaron is going to talk about that. Then I'm going to come third, and I'm going to talk about some of the backlash from the marriage equality success in most of the nation, and in particular, what we just heard about in the last couple of weeks that was going on in Indiana, and which could have happened in Wyoming because we had a similar bill. And then we'll end with Melanie Vigil. Melanie is the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Gay Rights in Wyoming for the ACLU. And she'll talk about her work in that context. But I also wanted to mention that Melanie is currently a part-time MPA student here at UW, and last year was one of the Arts and Sciences top 20 graduates and was ultimately the Spittlary winner, which is the most outstanding female graduate from UW, which is just amazing. And Melanie is going to talk about her work, which takes her around the state in order to talk about issues of gay equality. And to end, honestly, on a happy note because of something that just happened in Laramie this week. All right, so that's kind of the roadmap for what to do. And so, Professor Novogradsky, you're on.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me. The issue of equal marriage is going to be argued before the United States Supreme Court on April 28th. The same issue was argued 2 years ago, but the Supreme Court punted. So we're back at the Supreme Court for what we hope will be a 50-state solution to the issue of the legality of same-sex marriage. I have a small role to play in the case, which I will describe, but hopefully it has been a complementary and effective position to advocate for a decision that seems to be long overdue. Not to take you to law school or to the other side of 15th Street, but you do need to understand one thing, which is that in this country, marriage is a creature of state law. That means that each state gets to define marriage according to its own particular family laws and definitions. And because we are, say, next door to Utah, you might understand that what marriage is has been in flux and a contested issue for more than 120 years, and it has certainly been a matter of hot debate within states as they decided who could be married and under what terms and at what age and in what configuration. All right. Starting in 2003 in Massachusetts, individual states began to litigate the issue of equal marriage or same-sex marriage. In the United States, same-sex marriage has been a post-2000 phenomena. And remember that until 2003, some states forbade and provided criminal sanctions for consenting adult same-sex intimate activity. And so there were two big legal developments happening simultaneously. In Massachusetts, an effort to win recognition of same-sex marriage, and in Texas, a fight over whether the state of Texas could continue to criminalize consenting same-sex sex. I worked on some of these state law cases in California and Connecticut, some of the early states to adopt fully equal marriage. And you'll recall that at the time, some states had only opposite-sex marriage, some states had opposite-sex marriage and civil unions or domestic partnerships, and some states had the beginnings of what today we call full marriage equality. Now, today I believe there are 36 states in the District of Columbia that fully recognize marriage between people of the same sex. This has been achieved in three different ways. Some state legislatures have adopted the view that the best way to implement fully equal marriage is to pass a law that takes gender out of the equation and makes marriage between two people, usually over the age of 18. Right? In some states, there's been a referendum, and the state constitution or family law has been changed. And in other states, there have been state or federal judges that have struck down marriage restrictive laws and opened up the institution of marriage to same-sex couples. This debate over equal marriage has become a touchstone for LGBT rights more generally and enormously symbolic. It wasn't obvious in 2003 when Massachusetts wanted equal marriage for all people of Massachusetts, but it has certainly become a mainstream, around the country, ferocious debate over the meaning of equality. In Lawrence versus Texas, the decision that ultimately struck down Texas's anti-sodomy law, two important things happened. Number one, Justice Kennedy looked to global practices and world opinion to hold in his majority decision that what was happening at the European Court of Human Rights mattered for the definition of liberty and equality in the United States. Absolutely path-breaking, right? Usually, the United States Supreme Court interprets our Constitution by reference to that which is occurring domestically. There, he looked to international practices and recognized that we don't have a monopoly on the meanings of the words dignity, equality, and liberty. The second thing that happened is that Justice Scalia offered a ferocious and very mean-spirited dissent, but it included one hell of an observation, and here's what it was. Justice Scalia said that what he called the homosexual agenda, but I think he was referring to homosexuality, has traditionally been viewed as a sin, a sickness, or a violation of the law, a criminal act. And he said that if it can't be one of those three things, then there is no basis to discriminate against same-sex people or same-sex couples. And horror of horrors, we would have marriage equality before too long. See what happened in Canada and Massachusetts. So he called it, right? He didn't, he was trying to rally opposition to this idea that he's plainly uncomfortable with. And I don't expect that we're going to get his vote in the upcoming case. But it was significant because, in a sense, it provided a roadmap for proponents of a robust notion of equality, decency, due process, and dignity. Let's fast forward 12 years, and we have a handful of states that are resisting the judicial, legislative, or popular referendum momentum towards equal marriage. And they are saying that they have laws on the books that were enacted by democratically elected legislatures, and that these laws reasonably restrict marriage to one man and one woman. Something like 21 courts have rejected that argument, but 2 courts have not. There was a district court in Louisiana, and then significantly the Sixth Circuit, which governs a collection of Midwestern states, Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, I'm forgetting the fourth.
Puerto Rico as well.
Puerto Rico's in the First Circuit.
Oh, I know.
Right. But yes, there are a handful of outlier states, now in the minority, that are challenging the notion that we should have full marriage equality. And it is their opposition to the momentum that has developed around the country, either legislatively, by popular referendum, or by judicial reasoning, that has caused this case to go back to the Supreme Court. I and some other international law professors offered a brief to the Supreme Court sharing the reasoning of the 20 other countries that have adopted fully equal marriage. So countries as diverse as South Africa, Argentina, Portugal, Spain, New Zealand, France, England, have all adopted marriage equality, again, for the same broad reasons that the individual states have in this country. In response, a collection of law professors at BYU have offered the Supreme Court the opposing view. And what struck me about the BYU submission to the Supreme Court is that it rests entirely on a single idea. Put differently, it is utterly bereft of anything but the argument that marriage is a decision for the Democratic majority within a state to make. This is the exact argument that was raised in Loving versus Virginia and soundly rejected by the United States Supreme Court in 1967 in opposition to anti-miscegenation statutes. So the Supreme Court will hear argument from proponents, specifically from Mary Bonato, on the issue of whether the solution for 37 states should be extended to all 50 states for reasons of equality, liberty, and dignity. And then it will hear a second argument, which says that if the answer to the first question is no, do the states that have not adopted equal marriage, do they have to recognize marriages from other states, right? These are the two questions that will be argued before the Supreme Court. I'm confident that our side will prevail, and I welcome any questions or comments you may have on the Supreme Court action.
Great, thank you, Noah. This is an applauding kind of group. Okay, Jaron, from Wyoming Equality.
Hey, it's great to see everybody here. I want to thank the Shepard Symposium for allowing us to come back and for feeding us again. I was just curious when I was listening to Noah talk, how many people in here, by a show of hands, thought Wyoming might be the last state in the union to get same-sex marriage? I heard that all the time when we were running the campaign, and luckily that didn't turn out to be the case. But I want to tell you just a little bit about Wyoming Equality. Our mission statement is, Wyoming Equality seeks to enhance the lives of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people in the equality state by providing education, information, activities, support, a networking system, and an advocacy system for people impacted by gender and sexual orientation issues. And it surprises a lot of people to know that Wyoming Equality has actually been around for a little over 25 years. When we were running the marriage campaign, I read an article, and I think in one of the smaller state newspapers, it said, Wyoming Equality, a group that was formed to run the marriage campaign. And no, that's not true. We've been around a long time. I'm a Wyoming native. I grew up in Wheatland, spent 30 years in Wheatland, and then have been in Cheyenne for about the last 7 or 8 years. And when I became involved with Wyoming Equality, they were kind of a social group. We did a lot of get-togethers, campouts, dances, that sort of thing. And I got a call one day from the chairman of the board at the time, and he says, there's this really ugly bill in the legislature, and I need you to testify at a committee meeting. I didn't even know what that meant. So I was nervous, and I went up there, and it really opened my eyes to what was going on in Wyoming. And there's a group that needs to stand for the LGBT community and try and defeat really ugly anti-gay legislation and promote pro-LGBT legislation. And I found I really enjoyed that. So I've tried to take the group in a bit more of an advocacy position. And one of the things every year after the legislative session, we would sit down and kind of debrief. What worked, what didn't work, what were our successes, what were our challenges. And a few years ago, we caught the attention of some national groups, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, Freedom to Marry, and they wanted to do a debrief call with us after the session. And 2 years ago, we ran the Domestic Partnership Rights and Responsibilities Act. And we were viewing it as, it wasn't marriage, but if we had to play politics, let's do it. Let's get some protections with the idea, that marriage is the ultimate goal. And that bill had failed. And National Center for Lesbian Rights said, why don't we litigate this? And, as the chairman of the board, I always feel like my responsibility is to bring about the change that so many of our members desire as quickly as possible. And it became very clear to us that litigation was probably the quickest way to get this done. Not that our legislative friends couldn't have done it eventually, but why not sue them? So they said, what we need you to do is go out and find plaintiff couples. And here's what we're looking for. We'd probably like 4 to 6 plaintiff couples. And that doesn't sound like very much, but in Wyoming, that was a challenge. That was a challenge. And we wanted couples who had been married legally in other jurisdictions and wanted their relationship recognized in Wyoming. We wanted couples that wanted to get married in Wyoming and were not able to. And it was really important to find 4 to 6 couples because when Prop 8 was going on in California, there were 2 plaintiff couples and one of them broke up when the case was going on. So we had to make sure we had good, solid couples that were comfortable with all the media scrutiny and whatnot. And in the meantime, people are emailing Wyoming Equality, what are you doing? You're not doing anything. All the other states are litigating. We're going to be last. And of course, our legal counsel was like, don't let the cat out of the bag. We want the element of surprise. We don't want to tip off our opponents so they can start building their case against us any sooner than they have to. So I was just sitting on my hands going, oh, I want to tell them so bad. But we did finally file Courage v. Wyoming. What a great name for a case, Could you think of a better name than Courage v. Wyoming? I love that. I still love saying that. And one of the things people also ask us is, why did you not file in federal court? Why did you file in state court? Well, obviously, like Noah said, the big goal was to get this back to the United States Supreme Court so they could clear this up once and for all. And we thought we had a pretty good chance with the Wyoming Supreme Court. You apply in district court in Cheyenne, whatever that decision is, it gets appealed, and then it goes to the Wyoming Supreme Court. So when this ultimately gets back to the U.S. Supreme Court, how cool would it be to see a super conservative state like Wyoming have a Supreme Court that ruled in favor for the freedom to marry? So that was the plan there, and then some things changed that allowed us to file in federal court. But anyway, so NCLR, National Center for Lesbian Rights, said, we'll litigate this for you, pro bono. And some of the very best civil rights attorneys in the country are now working on this case. And it probably doesn't surprise a lot of you that the national media is really infatuated with what goes on in regards to LGBT issues in Wyoming. And why do you think that is? Because we're the Matthew Shepard state. What's changing in Wyoming? How are we becoming better for LGBT people? So, this is all over the media. NCLR is litigating, and Freedom to Marry, is everyone familiar with Freedom to Marry? They're another national group. they reached out to us and they said, we want to run a public education campaign alongside the litigation. Let's show the court that Wyoming is ready for this. And I actually signed a consulting contract with Freedom to Marry to run that campaign. And we did all kinds of different coalitions and different things. One of the first coalitions we built was Republicans for the Freedom to Marry. In Wyoming, I always say, equality is not a Republican or a Democrat thing. It's a right versus wrong thing. But we have one of the most red conservative legislatures in the country. So it's important to get the Republicans on board. Holy cow, a minute. So we built a coalition of Republicans. We built a coalition of attorneys for the Freedom to Marry. Noah helped me get a bunch of law professors on board with that. We delivered over 2,000 petitions to Governor Mead's office. We built faith leaders for the Freedom to Marry, which was fantastic. Churches all across the state from all different denominations, and we did business owners for the Freedom to Marry. So we're building these coalitions, and every time we released them, we get tons of media coverage, which is really great. Well, then the 10th Circuit struck down the bans in Utah and Oklahoma, and the U.S. Supreme Court stood by that. But they didn't say anything. They let that decision stand, which allowed us to fast track or file another case in federal court. And about 2.5 weeks later, we had the Freedom to Marry in Wyoming. So it moved very fast, which federal court moves much quicker than state court, and we won. And it was really exciting. I'm very excited to tell you that I got married on 12/13/14. I don't have to say my partner anymore. My husband and I are so happy, and people ask me, does it feel different? And I always say, absolutely it does. It feels incredible, it feels real, and I don't have to call him my partner anymore. He's my husband now. And I look across this room and I see so many great faces and familiar faces that signed petitions, that helped us advocate. And I can't thank you enough for helping us win marriage, because this was a collective effort on the part of all Wyomingites, and now we are a Freedom to Marry state. Thank you.
So today is the 1-year anniversary of the 10th Circuit argument in Denver, and I think it's a credit to Jaron and others how much has been achieved in the space of a year.
Yep. Right. Yes, very much so. And only a legal nerd would know when the arguments are, not just the decisions. Okay. So I'd be happy to talk with anyone about what has gone on in the legislature, but that's not going to be my topic today, and not because of what's been going on nationally in the past couple of weeks, and thought we absolutely have to touch on that. And so, just very briefly, as Noah mentioned, 2 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court, in the Windsor decision, knocked down a portion of the Federal Defense of Marriage Act, which basically said that the federal government need recognize couples who are legally married in states like Massachusetts and New York, and the whole spate of states where marriage was legal. The feds needed to recognize those marriages for lots and lots of different purposes. And so I want to talk about what has happened since Windsor, then to the enormous change that happened last year with not only the 10th Circuit, but other circuits, which more than doubled the number of states where marriage equality is the law of the land, to get us to understand some of the backlash that we've seen last week and some of the positive movement that Melanie will talk about in her presentation. So right after the Windsor decision, couples who were legally married, same-sex couples as well as opposite-sex couples that were legally married in states like New York and Massachusetts, had all state benefits as well as federal benefits. There quickly became issues of what about couples that got married, and I'll use Jaron as an example, who got married in Hawaii, a state where it was legal to get married, and then lives in Wyoming, a state where it's not legal. And the first thing that the feds had to grapple with were those kinds of examples. And for the most part, and over the course of maybe 6 months, so up until about a year and a half ago, the feds came back and said that, all right, we are going to recognize for federal purposes your marriages. All right, go ahead and file, for example, joint income taxes. However, there were a couple of major holes in that, and the biggest is Social Security. And for most of us, we think about Social Security as that deduction on our paychecks, right, that then helps old people, right? But the reality is Social Security goes far further than that, right? Social Security disability benefits, Social Security pays benefits to children whose parents have died, and there's all sorts of kind of spousal issues when it comes to Social Security benefits. And the Social Security Administration made a ruling that it would follow the marriage rules in the state where a couple resided, not where they were married. And so we have this enormous hole in terms of federal benefits that still exists. And so the Obama administration, in its fiscal year 16 budget, which will start in October of this year, has in it $500,000 for $5 million for fiscal year 16 and $1.1 billion for the next 10 years that would cover same-sex couples' spousal benefits. And that's being debated right now in Congress. Who's the head of the Senate Budget Committee in Congress? Enzi, all right? Our own Mike Enzi is the chair of that committee. Okay, so that's one kind of major hole that still exists, all right, and that only full marriage equality will stop that, all right? So just because we live in a state where there's full marriage equality, we want full marriage, these issues still exist for us, but it's so important that there's full marriage equality throughout the nation, all right? And so for those other 14, 16 states that aren't in marriage equality states. Okay, then following Windsor, right? And then following, again, all of these federal circuit decisions in 2014, there has been other backlash. And that backlash has come in the form of what are called RFRAs. All right, and the RFRA is an acronym, RFRA, for Religious Freedom Restoration Acts, okay? It has the same name as a federal law called RFRA that was passed in 1993, the purpose of which was to define more specifically what the First Amendment protections of the exercise of religion means. And it came about because of the federal government, honestly, going after American Indian tribes in terms of two things. One, land, right? And tribes coming back and saying, unlike, for example, I was brought up Catholic. When I think about land for Catholics, it's basically a church, right? For many American Indian tribes, sacred land can be 1,000 square miles. That's sacred land. And the feds wanted access to that land for whatever reasons, as well as the feds were firing federal employees who were American Indian who tested positive for peyote, okay? So the RFRA that was passed in 1993 was based on kind of prohibiting the feds, all right, from doing that. It was, okay, so that's 1993, and that's just in general, and the legal people around me say, oh God, all right, she just took this and put it down to here, but forgive me for that, but that's kind of it in general. Okay, next what happened is that the RFRA was determined to not extend to literally state action. And so a whole group of states, 10 or 12, something like that, passed state RFRAs that would prohibit the state government from doing the same kind of thing. So we have in the 1990s, the federal government as well as a whole bunch of states passing a RFRA, okay? Everything has been fine. We haven't heard anything much about RFRA since then. up until last year, about a year and a half ago. And in a case that is referred to as the Hobby Lobby decision, right? We have a privately held corporation use RFRA in order to make ultimately a successful argument that the Obama administration's definition of comprehensive health care coverage for employees, which includes contraception, right? Catastrophic care, and you need to have access to X, Y, and Z, but it also included contraception, went against its corporate beliefs, its corporate religious beliefs. And the Supreme Court upheld it under RFRA. Okay. So now we have RFRA out there with a state RFRA with a slightly different, actually an incredibly different interpretation than had existed before. Okay, that was successful. So what happened then in the past year is that in many legislatures, including Wyoming, for those states that didn't have RFRAs, there was the introduction of a broadly expansive RFRA, all right? Where Wyoming, we didn't pass it. It honestly passed out of the House, I'm ashamed to say, out of my chamber, and the Senate sat on it, all right? But we had one that was very comparable to what we have heard about in Indiana, okay? So, following marriage equality, we have numerous examples of couples being discriminated against, and in particular in relation to marriage specifically. All right? So the cases that hit the news are the ones regarding a photographer who refused to take pictures of a gay couple's wedding, a baker who refused to make a cake in Indiana, all right, and we're going to Indiana now, a pizzeria who refused to cater a gay couple's wedding reception, and we were just sitting at a table where someone told us he had pizza at his wedding reception. There he is, all right, but a pizzeria who proudly said that they would not cater a gay couple's wedding reception. And here I want you to remember a historical analogy, that the ability to sit at a lunch counter and order a hot dog, which is an iconic image from the civil rights movement, wasn't at all about hot dogs, right? We all know that. It's about, we're not talking about pictures and cake. We're talking about dignity, humanity, opportunity, and honestly, survival. CNN just reported on a pediatrician who refused to care for the infant of a gay couple, citing her religious beliefs that wouldn't permit her to bond with that family because it violated her religious beliefs. Okay, so in some of these states where these issues of discrimination came about, they were states that had anti-discrimination clauses or statutes that included sexual orientation and gender identity, states that didn't, states that had an old RFRA, right, and then some states that had a new RFRA. All right? And so you've got all sorts of different kinds of configurations as what's going on. So the question, as it could simply be framed, is how do you balance the rights of GLBTQ individuals and couples who can now marry, for example, with the rights of those who claim that their exercise of religious beliefs is burdened by gay rights, and in particular, marriage, okay? So Indiana, like Wyoming, began issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples last year. Like Wyoming, Indiana doesn't have a statute that includes anti-discrimination protections for sexual orientation and gender identity. But unlike Wyoming, Indiana just passed a broad RFRA. While proponents of the bill claim that it was exactly the same as the federal RFRA and the ones that were passed by the states in the 90s, the reality is the bill is different in several ways. First, unlike the federal law, the Indiana law explicitly protected the exercise of religion to entities including for-profit corporations. It truly codified and expanded Hobby Lobby, all right? Not only smallly held corporations, but largely held ones. The bill's protection of a religious liberty may be invoked not only when a person's religious freedom has been burdened, but also when it was likely to be burdened, all right? Again, an enormous broadening. And finally, that RFRA could be used as a defense to not serving or accommodating based on sexual orientation or gender identity. Okay? It could be used as a defense. We don't want to serve you pizza. We don't want to take your pictures. And not only to those who belonged to a religious denomination who had a very specific anti-gay creed, the anti-gay church, right? But also to those, but based under the notion of freedom of conscience. And we heard that phrase used in the Wyoming legislature in the floor debate. All right? Again, it wasn't going to be limited to religious denominations who had an explicit kind of anti-gay agenda, if you will. And somebody could say, and I go to that church every Sunday and I pray every day, all right, to that particular God. It was just simply saying it was my conscience. Okay? So, as a result of passing this particular RFRA, Indiana came under attack. All right, in particular, the company's Angie's List was going to expand there. They had a $40 million expansion with 1,000 jobs that they were getting state money for, and they said no. All right, take your money back. We're not coming. We're not expanding. We're not going to have 1,000 jobs. All right, 5 states immediately forbid state. I've got 1 minute. Okay, 5 states forbid state workers from traveling to Indiana. Apple Corporation, NASCAR, the NCAA, all had statements about not going to Indiana. I have a friend who was driving to the Boston Marathon who was doing his triptych to go around Indiana. All right, the Indiana governor went on TV a couple of weeks ago and totally botched the interview, right? You probably all heard about that. Being asked all sorts of questions, he stumbled all over the place. He basically just wanted to say, we're Hoosiers, we're nice people, come on. We're not going to be mean to you. And to every question that he was asked substantively, his answer was nothing. Right? Because in fact, that RFRA would have allowed the kind of discrimination that was being talked about. Okay, so ultimately, he went home, the governor and I'm saying Wyoming, and the Indiana legislature, which again, the state did not have a statute that protected individuals based on sexual orientation or gender identity. They then added that to their RFRA, ultimately nullifying it from what its real purpose was, which was to allow for that discrimination. So now that can't happen. So my last comments. In 1968, a man named Morris Beisinger, a Christian man, fought his way to the Supreme Court in order to get a ruling that his Christianity was clear, that slavery was God's will, that desegregation was Satan's work, and that the federal government was antichrist. And moreover, God wanted only white people to eat at his 6 Piggy Park barbecue joints. And the Supreme Court decided that his religious freedom argument was patently frivolous, to use their words. And hopefully we'll see the same kind of reasoning in these upcoming cases. However, the reason that the Supreme Court could do that is because we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which includes race, all right, as a protected category. The need for having statutory protection that our courts can rely on is absolutely crucial. And that what we don't have in Wyoming, what Indiana didn't have, is sexual orientation and gender identity protected in their statutes. And so that now moves us into what's going on here in Wyoming to assure that that happens. And I want to turn it over to Melanie Vigil for her talk. But before I do that, I want to, because she told me she has to leave, know that there was a success here in Laramie this week that Melanie will talk about, and that it was led by an advocacy group, a community advocacy group. I think several members are here, but one of the spokespeople is Bria Frame, who is in the back. Bria, stand up. Stand up. And Laramie has, on the first reading of the City Council, passed a non-discrimination ordinance. No, it needs to go through a second and a third reading, but that first reading passed 8-1. And congratulations for all of your and others' hard work on that. Okay, so turning over to Melanie Vigil, speaking with her hat of the ACLU on.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be on the panel today. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So I would like to say that we can all pack up and go home because we won marriage, but that is clearly not what is happening. You can still be fired, evicted from your apartment, or denied services because you are LGBT here in Wyoming. So the ACLU of Wyoming and Wyoming Equality both recognize that, and so they put together a really awesome grant proposal to hire 2 organizers to go around the state, give town halls, do presentations, talk to community members and city councils about passing an ordinance or a state law with the goal of protecting LGBT people. And so that's what I'm here to do now. I've done presentations in Laramie. I was a part of the MLK Days of Dialogue. I did an event for them. And then I just got back from Lander not too long ago. I'm actually from Lander, and I did a presentation there. So we talk about the need to protect LGBT people in this state, and that's really what Laramie has started to do right now. We need to realize that non-discrimination issues are different than marriage equality. There was a recent poll that just came out in December of 2014, and it was done by a Republican polling group. And they found that 78% of respondents or people living in Wyoming that did not agree with marriage equality based on religious beliefs still didn't believe that you should be able to be fired from your job just because you're gay or transgender. So I think that's really interesting and telling of where we are here in the state now. Right now, as Kathy mentioned, we have a Laramie non-discrimination ordinance before City Council. I was at the meeting. There was an awesome turnout. In fact, I think it was Bria who asked the crowd behind her to stand up if we supported the non-discrimination ordinance, and almost 60 to 70 people stood up in support. So that was awesome. It's actually in the front page of the Laramie Boomerang, so if you want to pick up a copy of that, you can read it for yourself. It was great, and the vote count was 8-1. Still, as Kathy mentioned, there's still 2 more readings, so we still have a ways to go. But there will be a public hearing on April 20th, and we would love your support. The task force here in Laramie has been going around getting business pledges, so they go to businesses and ask them to sign basically a piece of paper that says we support protecting LGBT workers, and we are supportive of the LGBT community in Laramie. So this is something that we hope to continue throughout the state. We have several towns that we'd like to work on, but if you have an organization or you're part of a faith group or anything and you'd like me to come speak at any event about non-discrimination issues, I'm putting a plug in for myself now. So invite me. I will gladly go and speak. Let's see. So public perception has changed over the years. I know that when I was in Lander last summer, there was a pro-marriage equality picnic, and about 300 people attended. And so that was super important because Lander is a rural town, and it's not the Cheyenne, it's not the Laramie that people see as more liberal towns in Wyoming. And unfortunately, about a week or 2 later, there was a pro-traditional marriage picnic in the same exact spot with about as many people attending. So that was unfortunate, but as latest statistics show, about 62% of Wyoming residents as a whole support non-discrimination legislation. So I think going to all of these towns and just kind of presenting this information and talking about discrimination issues as a whole is really important for the community to listen to engage with, and to have positive discussions about, because this is an issue that's not going to go away anytime soon. And hopefully Laramie will be able to set an example for the rest of the state and send kind of a positive message that, hey, LGBT people are welcome here. We support them. We don't want to discriminate against them. And if you do, then this is what's going to happen. So having those kind of protections in place in Laramie is going to be awesome. If you have anybody that I can talk to in your other towns, if this is something that sounds like something that you need in your town, please let me know. I'm available after this panel discussion, and I'd be happy to talk to you. But that's kind of what's happening in Wyoming after marriage equality and after the failure of SF 115, which was a statewide non-discrimination bill that did fail. We did get awesome support during the legislative session, but unfortunately it did fail in the House. And so we're hoping to get these ordinances passed with the goal of going back to the legislature and saying, hey, these Wyoming towns support this. We support non-discrimination, so let's get it done. Let's get it done in the state on a statewide level. So that's kind of what I'm here for and what my job is, and it's been really rewarding. I've had so much support going around the state, and we plan to do a Tour Day Wyoming here this summer, so I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to continuing the awesome work that I've been doing lately. So, thank you.
Okay, we have about 20 minutes for questions. Yeah, go ahead.
How many other towns or cities have passed these ordinances? Or have any passed ordinances in Wyoming?
Nope. No, so Laramie would be the first one. There are currently no towns or municipalities that have any sort of this legislation passed.
Yeah, go ahead, over here.
What does the ordinance do in the end? What are the protections in the my question is, what are the protections with related to the ordinance? And so if something were to happen, discrimination-wise, what would actually happen, to the other side of that?
So again, the ordinance right now is in its first reading, so it can be amended. So know that I'll answer for what I know as the ordinance stands today, but it can be amended. And it's a really, honestly, a very nice comprehensive ordinance. It covers employment discrimination, it covers housing, and it also covers public accommodation. And so that means going into a business and not being served, for example. And so then what would happen is that if an individual felt like he or she was being discriminated against, would bring that complaint to the city manager. And that ultimately there could be a fine in the same of the violation of any other kind of city ordinance. Yeah, keep on going.
Kathy, I'm really concerned about different legislation around the country that's blocking gay families to be foster and adoptive parents. Could you speak to where we're at on parenting issues for LGBT families?
In Wyoming, interestingly, Wyoming is a state where we don't like legislation a whole lot, and so we have none. And so we have nothing that is pro or con. And so what that has meant is that we don't see the explicit prohibitions that we have seen elsewhere, and that our one, what you would call statewide organization, it's something like the Children's Blank Society, does anybody know its official name? Yes, the Wyoming Children's Alliance, which does adoption, doesn't have any explicit prohibitions, and from what I've heard anecdotally, doesn't discriminate. I'm sorry, you had a follow-up, I think.
Oh, sorry. I guess I'm not really, as a queer person even, I'm not really in support of the non-discrimination ordinance. And with that being said, I just, especially in the living circumstance, I don't understand why if my landlord gets fined, I'm any safer, or I'll feel safer, or it will really impact in that way. And so if I'm not going to feel safer, then why control these small businesses and landlords anyways? Because I feel like they also have a right to not hire, or a right to fire, as we have always had that right in this state. So why is this ordinance necessary right now if it's not, it doesn't make me feel any safer? So why is it necessary that they get fined, when the truth is I feel like they have a right to their opinion to not like me? They don't have to.
Yeah, so I would say they do have a right to their opinion, but they don't have a right to discriminate. Just like if a black person was fired from their job, that's illegal. So what we're trying to do is get LGBT people as a protected class, so that there are repercussions in cases of discrimination. Now, I understand that everyone does have their own opinion, but their opinion shouldn't reflect whether or not I get served at a restaurant. And although it doesn't make a lot of queer people feel safer, there is kind of an avenue for justice, at least. And that's what we're trying to do, and that's what we're trying to accomplish.
And I would also just like to add to that. I understand what you're saying, in that some people, you're never going to change their mind. And they have their beliefs for whatever reason, and they're going to stick to that. I will tell you, I have been, my job that actually pays the bills is I'm a financial advisor. And I've done that for about 20 years. And I have clients that I don't agree with politically. I have clients that are straight, that are gay, that are lesbian, that are transgender, and we all manage to work in harmony together, even though, some of their religious beliefs or political beliefs I might deem as, wow, that's not for me. But as a businessman, business is open to everyone. And we have heard stories at Wyoming Equality of people who have literally been physically tortured on the job site because they're LGBT. And that's wrong. And that's what we've got to stop, is that kind of a discrimination. And I understand it might not make you feel better, but once these protections are in place and the public can see, that we are open for business, I think it will also change hearts and minds, and people would become more tolerant and accepting. And it's just like now, if you had a bakery that said, I'm not going to bake a cake for this African-American couple, we would be outraged, wouldn't we? We would absolutely be outraged. So that's what this is about, is protections for a class that is currently unprotected.
I guess I understand that from a political movement stance, that maybe in time with ordinances passing this way, it will change the overall opinion of, how we treat LGBT people in our community. But I just feel like these businesses have, I feel like the part of us that needs to make a movement is the part that stands up for our opinion. So if there is a bakery that doesn't want to bring in or hire or whatever African American people or LGBT people, I feel like that business should be allowed, but that people should stand and say, I'm not going to go there, and eventually economically they will not survive. And so that is the way I feel like we could make a collective stance rather than controlling their right to that business. Because I feel like, if we don't like that they don't hire gay people, we shouldn't go there. But I feel like that has a representation. There are people who might like a restaurant where there aren't any gay people, and as much as I am gay, I understand that. So I guess that's just an opinion that I would like to have out there.
Okay. Kate?
I think I can use my teacher voice. But for the online learners, online visitors.
Okay, all online now, you can hear me. So I think Jackson Hole actually has protection. Is that true?
Only for city workers.
For city workers,
Yeah,
okay. So there is some form of discrimination still allowed, I suppose. But my question is, given this forward movement, what do you think are the next steps that we all could take as people in our communities? And I look forward to hearing your answers. Like, what would be like the top 3 things that we could do?
Well, I'm going to jump in first, and I want you to take up Melanie's request to go out to your communities and work with her in order to have those kinds of talks. And, that I think that will be incredibly important, that at your churches, at your community centers, at your public libraries where you're from, that you ask to have this kind of conversation. Make her earn her kibble.
How many people here are actually from Laramie? So most everyone else is from other parts of the state or other states. I would say Laramie and this non-discrimination ordinance has done it absolutely perfectly in that they started a grassroots movement of Laramie folks who went to businesses and said, would you be willing to sign this pledge? Would you be willing to testify at a city council meeting? And so, you know, the facts show us that people don't want to discriminate against people that they know and love. We encourage people at Wyoming Equality to come out of the closet. You know, I mean, it's a personal journey for everyone, but once someone finds their voice and is able to say, Mom, Dad, coworkers, colleagues, I'm gay, I'm a lesbian, I'm transgender, it changes hearts and minds very, very quickly. So if we can go back to our communities as an LGBT person, most importantly, as a straight ally, and say, I'm standing with my LGBT friends, and we need to pick up where the legislature was unable to. And, you know, we've identified, you know, Laramie, all these great communities, but what if we could do this in Chugwater? You know, in some unsuspecting communities. And that's the biggest thing that I would just echo what Kathy said is lend your voice to the movement. We need people more than ever to stand up and say it's time.
I'll add one anecdote, and I was honestly appalled by this, and I think some of my legislative colleagues were as well. We did have a fair housing bill that has in it all, and it was just kind of putting into our statutes what is somewhat necessary to mirror the federal law, and you know, every other page has a list of quote-unquote protected categories, and you know, it would have, you know, sex and gender and race and ethnicity and religion and disability, and you know, I attempted unsuccessfully to add sexual orientation and gender identity. And what I shared with the body is we got 1,400 email messages on the anti-discrimination bill that was going through. That's an enormous number. But one of them, and I didn't get it, and so this person very specifically took my name out and said that I, as a lesbian, should declare a conflict and I should not be allowed to vote, because I would benefit from not being discriminated against, right? Or that they would have a benefit for discriminating against me, but that was literally, and that they wanted a rules committee meeting on whether or not I should be allowed to vote. And I'm just gonna flip that and add to what Jaren said, that while it's important for those who can and want to come out, who are gay or lesbian, it is as important, if not more important, not because I agree with that I have a conflict and shouldn't vote, but that for straight allies to really take on this issue yourselves and to be able to go out of your way, honestly, to speak long and eloquently and difficultly, or in difficult situations, about why it is important to have full equality, why it's important to pass anti-discrimination ordinances. It's just not for the gay people, right? It's for all of us. It's what it means to live in the kind of society that we envision. And that's all of our responsibilities, whether gay or straight. And why we have such incredible allies, as in Noah, and the work that he's been doing for years.
Let me just jump in to say one thing about the marriage equality cases. When I argued the marriage equality case in California, it was on behalf of 10 couples before the state Supreme Court. And I was part of a coalition working with the San Francisco City Attorney's Office. And I was pretty much the only straight ally or lawyer involved in the case. And some of the couples seeking to get married couldn't quite believe that, in their words, I didn't have a dog in the fight, and that that I was really there for a principled human rights reason. Fast forward to 2013, and Ted Olson and David Boies argued the the California Prop 8 case before the Supreme Court. And there was a healthy debate among the litigants and the attorneys working on that. What did it mean for these two famous lawyers who we called the straight white hope to jump into a case on marriage equality? And I think one of the things that it meant was I saw it as sort of a maturation of an insider-outsider movement that was a big enough tent to encompass the most effective advocates rather than somebody litigating on behalf of their own identity politics. The second thing that I thought was that it was part of a just win baby approach to high stakes civil rights and human rights litigation. And I think reasonable people can differ on who should be arguing these cases, but it's very significant that Mary Bonotto is arguing the case at the Supreme Court. She won Goodridge now, 13 years ago, and is in a position to cap a remarkable career with a kind of public expression of full equality that was unimaginable a few years ago.
My question is for you, the law professor. I'm afraid to pronounce your name.
It's okay. You're not alone.
You ended your remarks by saying you were confident of a decision at the Supreme Court favorable to marriage equality. I wonder if you could just run by us again the grounds for your confidence.
Sure, that's a great question. It's pretty clear that there are liberal and conservative blocs on the court, and that based on the Windsor decision that Kathy referenced 2 years ago, that there are 5 votes for broad non-discrimination against LGBT people. This requires counting Justice Kennedy as one of the votes, in this case, against the Michigan and other Sixth Circuit states that are resisting full marriage equality. One reason I'm confident is that there was a request to stay certain aspects of the Sixth Circuit decision, and only 2 justices signed onto the request for the stay. This was a couple of weeks ago. And so only Justice Thomas and Justice Scalia appeared interested in derailing certain legal realities pending the Supreme Court argument. And I think that Justice Roberts and Justice Alito want to be on the right side of history. And where they come from and what their past decisions say is significant. And so I think it's quite possible that Justice Kennedy and Justice Alito will continue to give a wide berth to religious freedom arguments, as they did in Hobby Lobby, while simultaneously supporting equal marriage. I will tell you that there are something like 80 amicus briefs in the marriage equality cases, and they are almost all directed to an audience of 1, Justice Kennedy.
All right, panelists, any final comments? Audience? All right, thank you all so much for coming.
Let's give them a big round of applause. A couple of announcements before you go. We've got concurrent sessions all afternoon, and then at 5 o'clock we will start with our keynote speak. We've got a couple of opening remarks. The president would like to give some welcoming remarks, and then we will have Jean Kilbourne, acclaimed film and scholar, give a keynote address for us. And so if you have any questions, anybody wearing a Be True t-shirt is a part of the Shepard Symposium committee and can answer those questions or find the answer for you. So thanks for coming for the lunchtime, and I hope to see you in the sessions this afternoon.
So Kathy, I wanted to mention, I'm looking forward to nationwide marriage equality, but I wouldn't have